What's up, guys? We are in season 2 of the UNFOLLOW podcast. AP and I are back from a long hiatus. It has been not only a huge year of change, but I would say it's been a year of pruning. And so hope the one coming up is a year of growth, baby.
Yeah. No, I think change is an understatement. I think in every conceivable area, we've had some kind of pretty significant material shift. So I think we're excited to get back to the podcast. I had several people ask me over the summer, when you guys getting back, when it's season 2? And I was like, okay, let's do this thing, man. So no, we're excited. We're excited to give updates and kind of head into some topics that are close to our hearts, but some things that we can speak with a little more, I'd say, freedom, some liberty, because of our situations with employment and organizations we're a part of and not a part of, and all these wonderful things that we're excited to share.
Yeah. And then also we're going to try to share the video of this as well. So AP, I know people are going to ask, like, well, where are you at and why are there only Black people on the wall behind you? So you want to tell us that?
Yeah, I'm at the crib. I'm at home, and this wall of Black excellence, as I call it, right? I make my shift from a marketer that works with artists to potentially an artist that might do some marketing. This is my inspiration, man. These are all people or pieces of art or subjects that for me represent excellence in something they've done, or a picture that reminds me of myself. So this is kind of my laboratory of thinking as I try to go from writing budgets and briefs and PowerPoint slides to actually like writing nonfiction, writing poetry, writing about myself. So this is a part of the let's call it the re-education of Adrian Parker.
I love that from the perspective too of like the kids coming into your office and what do they see on the wall behind you, right? And each of those images probably has a story behind it, and I'm sure that you know them better than I do, but like that's really cool for you to be able to point to and say like, oh, well, this guy or this lady did this, and you can do that too.
Yeah, that's it. And some of them are just my faves. You got some, let me see, camera can go up there. You got some good ones up there. You see the Barack Kahindi Wiley, you got Ray Charles, you got, Gwendolyn Brooks, you got Stevie Wonder. I mean, some local artists, some originals, some Prince. I mean, it's going down, man. This is the non-corporate version of me.
I love it, but the one request I have is for you to put the Parker fam up there, right? The one with your OG picture on it. I love that one.
Nice. Fair enough. Let's do it.
Cool. All right. So as we jump into season 1 or season 2, episode 2, season 1, no, all of that was backwards. That was terrible. So as we jump into season 2, episode 1, I'll get that straight. What do you want to really start with, man? Like, I think the people are going to want to know, like, hey, what's the career update? What are you guys really doing? You guys have kind of alluded to that, but I think there's probably some bigger topics in this season 2 we want to get to. I think last season we really did a good job of touching on faith. We touched on ethnicity and culture. We tried to touch on work, especially if you're into marketing, because that's our backgrounds. And so as we move into season 2, like, what do you want to cover this year?
Yeah, I think it's a deeper, more material look at some of those topics, right? So instead of just like work, the value of it, like sharing our personal experiences a little bit, like how you're redefining work, what are the pitfalls and maybe some of the problems that you've had to work through as you've transitioned. I'm excited to talk. Let's talk about faith. Let's talk about politics. Let's talk about some of the more polarizing issues, not as hot topics, but as like people and like some of the people we love in our family, some of the people that we love in our communities, and how we're working to bring about change in ways. I'd love to share a little bit about where me and Alicia are in our kind of faith community and our journey there. But also some fun stuff, man. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all working on some great projects. I'm excited about some of the writing I'm doing. I know you've got some really good clients that you're working on and real estate projects as well. So I think it's digging into kind of like this, this living autopsy of, two 40-plus-year-old guys who have shifted some things. And then, some of the things we're struggling with, some of the things we're scared of, but some of the things we're passionate about as well.
Yeah. And I think for newcomers to this podcast in this season, if you were sent this by a friend or, somehow you stumbled upon it in iTunes, Adrian and I don't exactly look alike, and we didn't exactly come from the same backgrounds.
Yeah.
We may have come from a similar economic setting, but for those of you guys that don't know, AP and I met at our first job, which was in New Jersey and New York in 2002. And
Yeah.
it was, our first year right out of school. It was our first, corporate job together. Young black guy sitting in the smallest cubicle I've ever seen, making it look even smaller. And me, this, spiky haired boy band, white kid from West Virginia. And we just somehow fell in love with each other and our work ethic and creativity. And 20 years later, here we are.
Yeah, I can't get rid of him. So every black guy, right, has to have at least that one white guy where you're like, he's cool, but is he like cool? Like,
yeah,
could he hang out at the
cookout? Am I cookout approved?
Could he be at the cookout? Could he just hang out with Big Mama? And Daryl is that guy. Daryl could hang out with everybody. And people ask about him, hey, how's Daryl? So Daryl is African American family approved.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt too when you have like a black name, right? When your name is very multicultural, as you say. So
if you're a white guy named Daryl or like Terrence, you're good. You're like good. Halfway in.
Yeah. All right. So, what in the world are you going to do now that you have quit your full-time job?
Yeah, I came with the term the other week. I thought I'd created it, but I Googled, somebody created it first. It's pretirement. So I am pre-tired. I am not full-time retired, and I'm not full-time professionally employed. And so, as of mid July, I'm a free agent. And so I'm taking 12 months of wife approved time to just really dig into my creative pursuits. I'm writing. So I'm writing every day. I'm doing a ton of reading. Doing some advising on the side, but I'm actually in the process of really much more of a pivot, really. So not only was it a pause to take some time away from the corporate grind, because I needed a break for my mental and I think spiritual sanity, but really more important, I think what I loved about where I got to work at Patron for 7 years, where I got to lead marketing and work with some amazing people at the Bacardi company, our parent company, was I got a chance to really fall in love with the work of marketing, not the job, right? The job was all the stuff, all the campaigns, all the budgets, all the stuff, right? But the work, right, is really like tapping into people's hearts and minds. It was building out ideas that change how somebody thought about something. It was leading teams. It was mentoring. It was doing something I believe in every day. And so as I fell more in love with the work of change, of transformation, of being courageous about ideas, of being courageous about my company values and, how we tackle things in a society that's changing seemingly overnight, I realized I had an opportunity, at least I have an economic window where my time was more valuable than earning money, right? So I have a window where, like, instead of waiting till I'm 60, 65,
right,
I can actually like go for this now. And so I think as soon as Alicia said, let's do it, there's a part in this story I'm skipping over. I will get into that, but it wasn't a clear, straight path. But I think just the idea of pursuing what's in my heart. I've been writing for 15 years, but I've never really published a lot of it. And so now it's going through all the stuff of becoming a writer, creatively, mentally, spiritually. And it's tough. It's hard. It's scary, I'd say, but I haven't been scared about something in a long time. And it feels good to be scared about something that I believe matters. So that's where I'm at today. So we're writing every day, but I get to spend time with my kids. I'm at home. I'm doing my own like lawn landscaping. Like, I got to clean the kitchen every day. I got to drop the kids off. I mean, I'm not a stay-at-home dad because my wife tells me that comes with a list that I'm not quite hitting yet, but
you're right.
I am a house husband.
I'm glad you used the word husband at the end of that.
Well, depending on the day,
depending on the era or the century. Okay, so a couple quick questions. For all of those people out there that are afraid for you right now, right?
Yeah.
They're afraid that
Yeah.
you are not going to have enough groceries. Financially, are you guys going to be okay at home?
Yeah, financially will be okay. You know, it's fun. I got a couple calls when I kind of announced my departure from Patron on like LinkedIn and some social media. I had a couple mentors call me and some friends like, are you okay? Is this a Dave Chappelle moment? Are you like, you're not moving to Africa and you're like, there's not like, you're not checking into like a mental health facility.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, you know, I think we looked up, this has not been a knee-jerk or reflexive piece. We've been talking and praying about it for at least 2 years, but had never really saw the window where we felt confident doing it as well. So economically, we're in a really good spot where, you know, we could go on, you know, for a while without any significant W-2 income, right? So income from some of our investments, income from, you know, capital investments and stocks. Those are some things that we'll be smart about and use. But, you know, I think we looked up and realized we had income that we was kind of passive that we hadn't really tapped into. And so, we're in an ability to do that. But I also think, you know, just the opportunity to build potentially a job or a career pivot that, you know, is closer to some things I'm passionate about. That's a big move. And so, you know, I mean, there's nobody paying me to be a writer right now, put it that way. Right.
Yeah.
There's nobody, I'm blogging, I'm writing, but no one's cutting a check for that. So, you know, I spent 20 years building a career in marketing where people will cut a check for me to lead marketing.
Yeah.
So now I'm starting from like, but I'm, you know, I'm an intern. I'm an unpaid intern in my own job.
I think the interesting thing there that I take away from that is, number one, your financial decision making improved over the last 10 years, right? Because you've been pretty open about, like, if you track back to like when you were in your late 20s, early 30s, you weren't making the wisest financial decisions. And fast forward 10 years, you made really wise financial decisions. And it led to you being able to step away from your full-time job in order to create and build something that you're really passionate about. And so I think that's proof to those out there that are listening to this and, hey, you're 30 right now. It's not too late for you to do this and still create a window that you can step away and do your thing that you're really passionate about. I think so often we think, okay, well, I'll shift my mindset and then I'll start saving money and I'll be okay when I'm 65. That's true. But like, to your point, right? Like, we're not guaranteed to get to 65. And there's some things I'm really passionate about right now. If you would just like grind for 10 years, make really wise decisions, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to be able to create 12 months that you can step away and build and do whatever you want to, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's totally possible. I've gotten so many notes from colleagues who are like, man, I never thought of it like that, to like try to enjoy some of that now versus putting it off. And now, be honest, right? And, you know, there's a gap in this story, right? Where actually I left Patron. I took a job as CMO of a health technology company. And 3 weeks in, I was like, oh, I messed up. So, you know, so like I said, it was a straight line. I actually took a job that would have even further set me up. You know, it was a very, you know, the equity, some of the payout over a few years would have been very aggressive, but, you know, it would have been life-changing for our family. And so I think I use that as kind of a in between. But I realized really three weeks into the job that I hadn't made the wrong decision. And so that was the humble, heartbreaking part of it, where, you know, I realized like, oh, I'm really running. I wasn't brave enough to do what I really wanted to do. And so that was a piece where it's hard to, you know, if it makes sense on a spreadsheet, it's still this thing. And I realized I wasn't really running from the economic reality. I was running from the lack of prestige, right?
Yeah.
So being a VP of marketing, or, you know, a CMO, I was CMO for a month, right? So being CMO of a public company, something like that, like, that sounds good. People like respect you. I tell my neighbors, I tell my family and friends. And so now it's like, hey, Adrian, what are you doing? I wrote a post, or I'm reading James Baldwin, and you're like, oh, okay, like what are you doing? And so it's it was a gut check, but it was an ego check. And so now I'm, you know, it's probably that shift, you know, for me, I'm letting go of comparison and competition, and I'm just cultivating really a habit of joy, of gratitude, of thanks for where I am, who I am, and who I'm surrounded with. And I'm so appreciative of the things I already have. And so it's just it was a gut punch, but it was a good one.
Yeah. And I think, we've been in those meetings or those one-on-ones with employees, or, even for you speaking to even a broader audience, and you'll say something about, hey, it's not what you do, it's who you are. Right. And we've all talked about like, hey, when we sit down as guys in a room, one of the first questions that pops up is, it's like, hey, what do you do? Right. And so now your answer is very different. And you and I in the past would have even said like, well, you're not what you do. And I've even struggled to answer that question in a way, because I'm just being a jerk. Like, I don't want to give the direct answer of what I make my W-2 income on, right? Because I want it to be about who I am, not what I do. But when all of that's stripped away, and now you really have to answer that question, hey, what do you do, when you sit down with this new guy in your life, right? It's not an easy answer.
Yeah.
And so in a weird way, having that previous W-2 income behind you was a crutch, right? And that thing is pulled out. And now there is no what you do is who you are in reality. It's easy to preach that, but when you really do it, man,
sure.
that is a leap. It's a jump. It's no more crutches, right? So will you over the next 6 months to a year feel that that pain or that loss of, oh man, I'm not a VP, I'm not a CMO, and now I'm not as important. What am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
Or will you move into the truth of, hey, I don't do to be loved, right? I am okay. I am safe. I am loved. And I'm going to create some really great stuff out of that. And I'm going to have my own voice in doing that. And I think that's what my hope and prayer for you is through this journey of you can't just preach this stuff anymore. You are living this stuff, right?
Yeah, that's it.
You've been able to preach about being Black in corporate America, right? Yeah. Because you've been Black in corporate America.
Yeah, that's
now
real.
Now you are going to really live out what it means to be, a guy creating things and not doing to be loved anymore. And I think you're going to share and have a different voice from a very different perspective over the next 6 months to a year. And I'm so excited to be here for it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate the prayers. And I'm excited because, to speak to an audience of people that that I can relate. Right. So I've been in all the meetings and all the situations, et cetera. But now it gives me a certain credibility and I think authenticity to it, where without any strings attached, right? I'm not trying to sell you something. I'm not selling you my service. I'm not selling you my this software I created. I'm not selling you on something. I'm really just, it's really truth, right? So I'm excited. I know you're a couple months ahead of me in this journey. And you're much more talented, right? Like you've got like 5 things that you could make into a full-time job overnight. I could be a hair model maybe, but other than that, I don't really have as many gifts as you have. So
you would be a beard model. Yeah. It would be a beard model.
Maybe a beard model. But where are you at, DC? Because you're this now. You're like juggle. Got it.
Yeah. So it was last year. I just knew in October that it was time to step away. I'd been at Moore & Giles for 8 years, and for those of you guys who don't know, I was vice president of marketing for a leather company called Moore & Giles. It's based here in Lynchburg, Virginia. It's been around since 1933. Family owned, privately held, awesome company, great people. Really like family, to be honest with you. And so built a team there specifically in marketing and kind of helped to build that brand over almost the last decade. And I knew in October that it was time. I could feel it. I could feel that. Like I had created a team that could operate well independently. And I also looked at my own household. I looked at what Johanna was recovering from with the breast cancer and treatments. Nobody talks about how impactful those treatments are, especially into recovery. I looked at Emmanuel, who was about a year old, and he was dragging himself across the floor, starting to crawl, and that changes things. And then Ella and Easton and their education, right? Easton was going to school, but it was a much shorter day. And Ella was being homeschooled. And I just looked at Joe and I just knew that she was tired and that she needed help. So fast forward to December, I had that exact same conversation with Sackett Wood, our president of the company, and just he was great, gracious, loving about it. He knew, and we gave each other big hugs, said I love you. And starting January 4th of this year, I was unemployed.
So I could call you self-employed because you got
yeah, we've been self-employed for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Like we have been doing the real estate hustle, I guess you'd say, for 12, 13 years. And we've been doing a couple projects a year. And I've never shared this kind of out loud publicly, but we were approached by at least 3 different TV producers throughout those 13 years about doing renovation show, right? Like
HGTV, the Calfees. Oh, yeah. I can see it.
Yeah, right. Well, and everybody always says that. They're like, oh, when's the show coming? Well, the truth is that we were approached a bunch of times. But the problem is that we weren't doing enough volume. So they want you to do like 8 to 10 houses a year. And we weren't doing that volume. We were doing 2 to 3 houses a year because I had a full-time job. I was doing a lot of it by myself after hours. And so we just said, hey, like when you step away, like I think we could really go after this. Not the TV component of it, but like, you know, creating our own content, doing more houses, all that kind of stuff. But I think the bigger thing was about getting Jo healthy. I mean, when you looked at her and you just saw how much chemo did to her, how much radiation did to her, how much surgery did to her. And then on top of that, having a baby, like she was just exhausted, and she's still battling some of those things. And so 6 months later, she's just in a very different spot. She's much healthier. She looks great. She's not as worn down. And I mean, as parents, come on, like we're all worn down and tired, but you know, she's doing great. And so in July, we said, okay, I think we can do this. I think we can go, like we can push go. And so I've been working every day. Like I've been on the job site every day. I did go ahead and get my Class A commercial and residential contractor's license, which probably isn't, you're probably surprised I didn't have it at that point. You know, just like Johanna didn't have her real estate license until a couple of years ago because we'd just been doing it on our own for so long. But we figured if we were going to, you know, do it on a very professional level, that Penny Lane needed to have, you know, both of those things. And so right now we've got 4 houses that we're working on. We're working on a commercial rehab for a dear friend of ours right now who bought, it's like an older store / cafe. And it's got some showroom space and it's in Lynchburg. It's pretty iconic. So we're working on that. And then we actually have a 26,000 square foot apartment building we're getting ready to start now. We're finishing funding. The appraisal just came in at $3.5 million. So it'll be the biggest project we've ever done on our own. You know, most of our projects in the past have been in that $1.2 to $1.3 million range. So like, this is going to be much, much bigger, and it scares the crap out of me. You know, it scares the crap out of me. But along the way, like just like you, where you're going to be a writer that sometimes does marketing or a speaker that sometimes does marketing, you know, I'm a real estate / construction developer that sometimes does marketing. And I think it's just for those of you who are listening, like, and you're in marketing, know that you're never going to lose that component to you, right? Like you're always going to have that in your bag of tricks. It's always probably going to be your right arm and not your left arm. It's going to be the thing that I think we can always go back to and use to benefit that thing that we're working on. Even this podcast, like you can probably smell it, but the reason that we're doing this podcast, season 2, is to support the work that Adrian is writing. And so we're going to share some of that in real time. We're going to kind of test it. We're going to look at the analytics of the episodes and say like, oh, well, people responded to that, or there was a lot of engagement. Like there's something there, right? We might even have some brands on here in this season where we're like, really doing their marketing live at the same time. So I think that's the kind of update on where we're at. Financially, we're fine. Like you, over the last 10 years, we've made some smart decisions. We have some passive income from real estate. Johanna is an excellent saver. I'm an excellent spender. She's an excellent saver.
Usually how it goes. Yeah.
But we're good. We're good. And I think the real takeaway for me, and this is just me being transparent, is there was some wrestling in that first 6 months of what am I doing with my life? What am I doing? And I think you're going to go through that too. Because as men, I know specifically that so much, and we just talked about this, of what we do is connected to who we are. And when we're not doing any of that, sometimes we're like, man, do I have purpose? And I think it was a good reminder for me that, like, when we look at the countries in which you and I serve so often, and we visit for 10 days, we do some work and we continue to give money to, the big thing that we got to always remember is that work specifically, you know, for us as guys, has this way of creating value for us. And we see that in the book of Ecclesiastes, you know, as the writer goes through like what it means to enjoy the toil of your hands, right? Because it's going to have to happen. And there's nothing better than enjoying it at the end of the day. So I think for men to find meaningful work is so important, right? And I think that's what you and I really are leading ourselves into, right? Is how do we take this run at finding and creating and building meaningful work for ourselves, not necessarily getting paid for our time, because that's what we were doing in the past, right? We were getting paid for our time. Now we're going to get paid for what we create and our ideas. You know, for you, it's probably going to be more in the meta space. For me, it's going to be more probably in the physical space. But there's a couple things happening. Nobody's telling me where to go or when to show up. And that is scary. Right? There's like, let's be honest, when you are at your W-2 and the borders are be here at this time, leave at this time, and do these items, it's easy to be better than those things, right? Like the bar is honestly pretty low sometimes in corporate America. But when you are out here on your own and you are setting your own standard, that bar gets a lot higher. It gets a lot farther away. And to be honest with you, it's kind of scary because nobody's waking you up in the morning. So all of that exercising that you and I talked about last season that we do in the mornings, that we write, that we exercise, that we are meeting with other men, all of that stuff, dude, that's why that stuff is so important when you're on your own. Because when you're at that W-2 and you're at that office, man, you just show up and some of those things kind of naturally happen and you are already better than that bar. But dude, when you're out here on your own, ain't nobody showing up.
Like, there's nobody
coming to the door.
Let me ask you a question. If you had to just spitball call it your personal KPIs, right? So when you were VP of marketing at Moore and Giles, right? You had sales, you ran the website or the catalog, you had to have a certain amount of sales, certain amount of conversion on the site, you had a product launch, you had to get done. Like, what are your, like, call it life KPIs right now? What are your key performance indicators? And how do you think about like success in work now? Because it's all like flipped.
I am so glad you asked because I have a good answer. I think your personal KPIs, right? I love that term. Previously have been all tied to financial. Am I making X amount of dollars a year? Right. Then somehow I'm good enough. But as we know, if we really want to go after what we want to go after, that's the wrong KPI to be measuring. Actually, that's going to be a consequence of doing the other things. So the first thing I will tell you is that leaders write. Leaders write. Somebody asked me a long time ago as we were reading through the Bible, like, what did I learn about Paul? What did I learn about Timothy? What did I learn about some of these other apostles? I just said that they wrote. They wrote down their thoughts, or we really know that somebody else scribed their thoughts, right? But leaders write, whether it's writing something broad like you're doing to a broader audience or writing something one-on-one. If we look at past presidents, like the thing that leaders do is that they write. So every day I still have to write to myself and I have to write down what are the goals that I want, right? What are the 3 or 4 things that I want? And I have to consistently write them down. And then I got to come back to them. That's my KPI right there. I'm writing them down. And then I say, okay, have I accomplished those things yet? And, you know, maybe there's a financial one in there, but like for me right now, like I want to build a new shop. I want to build a new shop for Penny Lane, like not a retail shop, but a place where we go, we park the vans, we park the trucks. Like I've got a tractor shed, we've got space, I've got storage space, but no, I want a shop where you say, hey, like, and so I'm writing that down every day. And I will measure myself against that. Like, have I accomplished that thing yet?
Yeah,
you know,
that's cool.
And I think if I do that, I think the other KPI that everybody else is so concerned about finances will happen, right? That will be a consequence of doing good work. Another one that I'm writing down for myself right now is that Johanna and I have a vision for building what we would call ADUs, or their accessory dwelling units. We're coming up with new names for them, but in the current real estate market, smaller housing is having a moment. And the reason is for multiple reasons, right? Like, it's expensive. You know, we've all done life from home. You know, there's not enough inventory. So I'll put something small in addition to, right, that accessory dwelling unit. I'll put it in my backyard or attach it to the garage or whatever. So Johanna and I are building out a whole brand around that. And so that's cool. Something we're going after, right? So I can't write down, build the whole brand, right? Like, that's not a KPI. The KPI is build the model.
Yeah. That's so cool, dude.
Right? I'm going to build the model. And the first model is going to be at our house. The second one will be in the real world. It'll be for somebody else in 2022. But the first one will be build the model at our house. So that's the KPI. Super simple. If I don't build the model, I have not achieved my goal.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm jealous, man. You have some fun stuff you're working on. Well, if you need some help, you just let me know. I can't build. So yeah, I don't know. I'll
you'll be speaking. You'll be. Yeah, I appreciate that. If you could tithe towards my endeavors, that would be fantastic.
That'd be awesome.
All right, so let me ask you something. How are you going to get there? You know, you asked me about KPIs, so it's a similar question. But you want to be a writer, right? And I think that will also transition into best-selling author. I think that will transition into speaker, keynote speaker kind of role. It probably will transition into pastor.
Pastor of Bedside Baptist in Keller, Texas.
Joking, not joking about that third one, but like, how are you going to get there over the next 12 months?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, I think the next 12 months is probably I'm laying the foundation for what's going to come, right? So it's like foundation and blueprint. You know, so I think 3 areas where I'm very deliberate around focusing, and even built out like a Google Calendar schedule of it, is spending time with God, spending time with my family and my community, and then spending time creating, right? And so I think for me, the biggest part is that time with God. And it's not, you know, it's devotional. I read, I pray, but it's like time in nature. It's time to like just slow down and enjoy life is one. 2, I think for me is like with my family and my community, I realized like this journey I'm taking isn't, it's not about me, right? So it's not this like monologue of Adrian on the stage, like doing his thing. There is this interdependency there, right? So it's like, how am I really helping? So I'm still mentoring. I'm still supporting people and families. I'm still being generous with my time and my money. I'm still being able to like, you know what? Hey, here's somebody that needs some help. Here's a community group that needs some help. So I'm very diligent around like, hey, how do you spend time doing that? And none of those first 2 related to anything about, I won't make a dollar or a dime from those directly, but it's more about kind of the person I want to be. And I think part of my shift has been like from doing to being. I have such a gift where I can be without a productivity measure, right? So this week I wrote a lot. I mean, I wrote, you know, I stayed up a couple nights, you know, to like midnight just writing, right? Because I signed up for this writing contest. So I gave myself a deadline, right? So I'm like, I wrote 3 things and I'm publishing.
Wait.
Right?
Writing contest. Is this like 3rd grade where you win?
Oh yeah, like... absolutely. But you know, so in the literary world, right? So there's still gatekeepers in, call it traditional, the literary publishing business, right? So you can publish a blog and self-promote and publish. I do that as well, right? So I do my own stuff. But there's also these literary checkpoints, right? So what I want to do both, right? I'm going to write things that I think are helpful or informational, but I also want to write like for art and so for me, I need a deadline, right? So I'm a 7 Enneagram, right? So giving myself a deadline and like, I got to get done was great. Like I come alive, right? I'm like, oh, midnight, I got to go. I'm writing, I'm editing. I love it, right? So there's still that creative part. So that third, you know, priority is time to create. I spent 20 years, right? Creating ideas that sold tequila, that sold software, that sold sneakers, and some crazy good campaigns, right? I had a chance to do some amazing marketing, but none of that had anything to do with me or something I created directly. And so part of my pivot we talked about this before this podcast, was like finding my voice, finding my flow. I think about Eric Clapton, right? When he, locked himself in a room for, a year and just like learn like how do I go from good to great on the guitar, learn the chords, learn the keys, and like really finding your voice. Part of my journey is that, because, and this might sound cocky, so I have to be cautious how I say it.
Well, I'm gonna call you a jerk if it is. Okay.
Here it is. All right. Okay. Here's the truth. A year from now, there will be an opportunity for me to go somewhere and sell somebody something. I will have it might not be a CMO, I might be a V, whatever the title is. I'll have an opportunity to make good money doing marketing on a corporate level, right? That will be there. And I don't say that lightly, because I don't want to, have confidence in the future that I can't see, right? So it's not like, but it's like, I'm confident I could probably do that. But so if I spent this time and I had to go back to do what I did, I don't view that as success. I think success in this season is actually building the tools, the talent, the technique, learning how to write, learning the art, learning the rules, so that I can build this gift that I think I have into something not only that serves others, but becomes an opportunity to build a different type of career. And that's something I know I won't be able to finish that in a year, but I can start building the roots of it. But I'm very cautious of, I don't necessarily want to be the guy, the marketing guy that wrote the marketing book. I mean, because that's the easiest way to do it. I would have just done something. Hey, here's how Patron, became a, $1 billion brand.
Yeah.
But that's not
because that's what I would advise you to do, right?
Yeah. That would make sense, right? And trust me, I've got plans right here on my desk of, we'll just do this and do a newsletter, and the challenge isn't monetize myself. That's not the goal. My goal is create something new, different, that matters, and then monetize that. And so I'm very diligent on building that first, but also, I'm still doing advising. So I'm still working with some brands to help, not only keep me sharp, but also still mentor leaders who are building out companies. So it's an interesting piece of it, but it's kind of like I'm an artist in the studio, probably 3 days out of the week, and then 2 days out of the week where I'm still kind of a pseudo marketing guy. So it's a little fluid.
Well, and when I met you, one of the questions I asked you is like, what do you really enjoy doing? Like, what do you really love? And one of the things you told me was that you enjoyed writing. And there was this thing that you had written for, I think it was your dad or your father at one time. And he responded and said, man, like you really are a good writer. Like you're really good at this. And you even told me that at like 22 years old, and like it stuck with you. And so I think I know that about you, but I forget that about you. Like, man, like you really are a good writer. And it's also something that you found your value in from your father at an early age. And so you're just going back to that. And I think that that's beautiful. And it's fun to have a friend like me who's going to come along beside you and say, hey, like, how you doing on that? Where you at in your writing, right? You ready to publish the newsletter this week? Like stuff like that, so
that's awesome.
I'm excited to be a part of it with you.
It'll be a great journey. And I gotta say, I mean, I've had so many friends and family be so supportive and like, hey, how can I help? How can I get involved? And I have a list. I actually have an Excel doc of people who have said, hey, if you need, I have a list. So I will be reaching out to everyone on that list. Cause this isn't the Adrian show, but no, it's been great to have this time just to create and read. I spend a lot of time reading actually. And it's I think sometimes it feels self-indulgent. It feels like, shouldn't you be? And so giving myself permission to create, and like, it almost feels like treason to be able to enjoy life this way. So I have to talk myself off the ledge a little bit, because sometimes it's just I feel like I'm cheating.
Is this real?
Yeah. Am I cheating? Like, should I be doing? So that'll be a constant theme. When next couple months we got to do a check-in of like, do you still feel like you're cheating, or you found permission?
Yeah. All right. So to give you a question that I think everybody wants to ask that's probably listening to this, that are in their 20s or 30s, is if you could go back in time now, right? Knowing what you know now, if you could go back to 25, what would you do differently at 25 that you did? Maybe you did it, but maybe you didn't do it. What would you do differently at 25?
Oh man, two things come to mind at 25-year-old Adrian, who is still in, working in New York City. I think I met Liz Claiborne at that time. I'm the man. I thought I was a man. Two things. Learn how to direct your dollars and direct your desires. Those are the two things, right? So direct my desires. I feel like at that time, especially in your 20s, for me, it was all about, prestige. I wasn't married. So it was like girls, 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 girls. It was, what's new, what's different, what's hot. And like, unless you have that focus, I can see how I've wasted so much time and energy. There's so many, I feel like blessings I almost forfeited because I wasn't focused or disciplined. And so I think learning how to direct your desires, and it's like the age old tale of like, hey, you're a bachelor, you're in a big city, do your thing. But I can see how I wasn't necessarily open to counsel or wisdom. It was like, what are you doing? Right. So direct your desires, like having that focus, and then direct your dollars, man. Even though I'm in a much better and different financial position today, and I'd say some of that is smart decisions me and my wife have made. Another half of that is God's grace, who had just opened doors that we didn't plan on, open opportunities that we didn't deserve. It kind of happened for us. But you don't have to wait on a miracle, or like there's ways to do that. So if I'd started at 25, just like being smart, like live well below your means. So if I was 25, man, if I had known what I know now, oh man, like just lock in a lifestyle that is like, man, like instead of asking yourself, how much can you make? How much can I spend? Like, how little do I need? Right? Like, what's the cheapest car I could get? What's the like, man, that would change so many lives if you just learn how to economically be more wise. But at that time, I wasn't trying to hear it. So, so I don't know if I would have listened to me, but I wish I would have.
Yeah. How about you? If you're hearing this at 25, listen to the voice of Adrian.
Listen to the old man.
I think what I would tell myself at 25 is that you're going to change.
Yeah.
And nobody talks about that, right? Like nobody talks about how much you change in your 20s. So if I could go back, I would remove myself, almost third eye myself, right?
Yeah.
And see the change happening and run to it, and also do it in a healthy way, if that makes sense, right? Because I really started reading at about 25, 26 for the first time. Like I had read because I needed to, but then I started reading because I wanted to. And it changed my life, right? It made me wide open to new things. It made experiences better. It made me relationally healthier. And I think I would just look at myself at that period and just say, okay, keep doing more of that because it's going to pay off. I, like you, would have directed my dollars different as well. I would have started investing with compounding interest. Like nobody taught me about compounding interest at 25, right? And so I think my goal now with our team, so to give you some background, we've got a team of 7 or 8 folks. Most of them are from a Hispanic background, right? So Jesus is my business partner. He's actually one of what you would call a DACA kid. Like he came over when he was 12 or 13 at, the request of his parents. His parents already moved to the States. He was living in Mexico with his sister. And his family said, we want you to come live with us in North Carolina. And so he didn't really have a choice, right? So he got his brother and they came to the U.S. And he's one of those folks that you hear about in the news all the time that is DACA, right? So we've been going through the immigration process with him for the last 3 years, and it's an ongoing thing. It's not cheap. It's not fast, right? For anybody out there listening. But through him, we have developed a secondary family in the Hispanic community here in Lynchburg, right? And so one of the things that we're trying to teach our young guys is it's a game. Like money is a game. Investing is a game. You got to make wise decisions, right? We know that. You've got to have education and learning. We know that. And then the third thing is that you've got to understand compounding interest. And so that literally is what we're teaching. dude, we're playing a different game. Like some people think we're doing construction. Some people think we're renovating old houses. Sure, but that's not the game that we're playing. Like we are playing education. We are playing community. We are playing teach people things that normally in the circumstances or communities that they come from, that these things aren't taught. They're not, like there's certain communities where you grow up and like you knew this in 6th grade, dude. You don't know this stuff in certain communities in our country, and you think it's common knowledge. Well, you got a library. Well, you've got the internet. Nah, man, it just doesn't happen. And so our goal is to educate, and teach our team, and then that way. And you and I talk about this all the time. Like then we can build legacy type of wealth. Then we can make sure that all of the families that are working with us, right, are building wealth and legacy for the future, so that when you and I look back, we don't see generations of wealth lost because people didn't buy a home, generations of wealth lost because people didn't invest their money. We make every effort to teach that. And so when we leave this world, we leave it in a state of, well, everybody that we touched had access to the same information that we've been given. And we didn't hoard that for ourselves, right? Like we believe that the pie can get bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah, sure. Like, are we concerned about our slice of it? Yeah, but I'm more concerned with like making the pie bigger for everybody, especially those that are on our team. And so I think looking back at 25, I would just say, hey, if you know that this is coming up, if you know that this is the way that you want your life to be and the people that you want to surround yourself with, like get started earlier.
That's so good. Well, one thing we're going to talk about in a future episode, right? I'm passionate talking about diversity, equity, and how we move that forward in a material way. One thing I'm passionate about is there's real systemic disparity built into, I think, not only the American kind of, experiment of democracy, but it's built into our communities. And I think the challenge is, though, you can get stuck talking about it and pointing it out, which is not, I'm not dismissing that. There are people and researchers and writers and academics who are all talking about it. And that's important work, and policies that help fix it. But I think we also need the people who are doing it, right? 7 or 8 people now, right? Who wouldn't have access to knowledge or the capital, et cetera. And it's not necessarily their fault and not Jesus's fault at all. Like Jesus is doing what he can. And now he's got access and now he's giving access. And so now that disparity among those 7 or 8 people, right? That decreases and they're able to do it. So let's do both. Let's talk about it, educate. I'm going to write about it. Let's debate it. Let's do keynotes and blog posts. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. But let's do the thing. Let's change the thing. And I love that you're able to do that in a real meaningful way. You got to have both of those.
Let me touch on this real quick. So, in the current world we live in of social media, I am so tired of seeing everybody talk about things, but not do things, right? Yeah. So I'm going to give you the one simple thing you can do this week. If you own an Airbnb, you can log into the backside of your app and there's a little radio button and you can say, make my Airbnb open to refugees and people that are seeking asylum. That's all you got to do. Yeah. Like there's some details that will work themselves out through that. But like, if we believe what we say we believe, aren't we supposed to welcome the alien, the orphan, and the widow? Alien, orphan, and widow. Just keep repeating that to yourself and then click on that little button. And just wait to see what happens, right? Yeah. You must make yourself available. Yeah. Right? You can't just post like, oh, praying for Afghanistan. Yeah. Like, oh, praying for the kids that are stuck at the border in cages, right? Yeah. Nah, dude, you got to make yourself available. So a couple of weeks ago, we hosted a family from Honduras for 2 weeks. They actually came to the U.S. actually to get vaccinated because they couldn't get access to it there, and they had family here, so they came. We hosted them for 2 weeks. They were awesome. I think they left the Airbnb cleaner than than we had it for them. Yeah. And man, it was such a good experience. And so I would just encourage you out there to see exactly what Adrian said. Like, don't just write about it or talk about it or, heaven forbid, post about it. Yeah. Do something about it. Do something about it.
Yeah. The actions have to be there. And I think that's what's lacking in a lot of it. And sometimes people do stuff and they don't post about it. But I do think that's the energy and effort we spend fighting and things like that. And I'm guilty myself, right? I mean, I'll get into a a virtual, scuffle as quick as anybody. But I think we got to back it up. We got to put our wallets and our watches right in places where they can be a benefit. So,
and
we're gonna talk
that's
about
the
that.
wrestling of James, right? Like, and you know that's why I love the book of James so much. Is that's exactly what he's teaching? Is like, hey, like your posts, your grandstanding, your speaking on these items it's dead if you don't have works behind it, So I just encourage you guys, like, don't just talk about it, be about it, So
that's it, man.
All right, AP, that's gonna wrap up episode 1, season 2. Where are we headed? What do we got coming up for the next couple of episodes in this season?
Yeah, I think we want to dig really into we'll talk about our faith journeys. I think we both have been, I think not only us, our communities, our culture has been challenged.
Yeah, the church as a whole right now, there's a reckoning happening for past abuses, poor decisions in leadership. Like it's happening in our culture right now.
Yeah, I feel like we're the faith in America, right? The American church, I use that term very generally, is in the furnace. And so I think our response is going to be so important. So I want to share some personal stories there about, our only faith journeys and kind of how we're tackling that as well. I also want to let's talk about some of the special projects we're working on, some of the marketing. I'm working with a brand out in California. I want to kind of share some things about that on, kind of what we're doing from a work perspective and branding and marketing. And some of these are small businesses. So I think a lot of that will be applicable to people who have their own businesses or who aren't working in a $1 billion brand. You're working in a smaller brand as well. But then, let's talk about relationships, our wives, husbands. How are we treating women? How are we viewing them? How are we championing them? How are we supporting them? So many things have changed, I think, from the revelations have changed in the past. That I want to start to dig up some of that and share stories where I face planted miserably. And I had a request. Alicia asked me last night. She's like, let's need to dig into there's this thing there with the women and sexism and like we need to go a little deeper there. And so I don't have that one figured out as well. And I'm writing a post now, actually. I'll probably post it at some point in the next week. I've been very fascinated with because I have family and friends who refuse to get vaccinated or who have very different, probably more polarizing points of view on like the path to, getting over COVID, whether it's mask or distancing. And I live in a community that has there's a divide growing. So I've spent some time just talking to people, and it's been fascinating to hear. And we're reading books about, like, how do you like get a joint point of view on like how this works? So that's one I'm just a kid in the candy store trying to figure out it's the marketing kind of like, how do you get someone that's here to come, and then how do we start to do this together? So there's some topics on my head that I'd love to share about, some things I've been writing about.
Well, I think the go-tos for us are always going to be diversity. They're always going to be faith, and they're always going to be work, right? We know that. One of the things that you wrote down was going to be talking about the decoy of diversity, the diversity decoy, right?
Ooh,
and it was this idea about how diversity just makes us feel better, but is it actually changing anything? So we're going to unpack that. And then the idea of training yourself to get unstuck, like get your joy unstuck. That was one of the things that you talked about early too. I think you were calling it training wills, like WILLS, right?
Yeah.
I'm willing myself to do this, like how to get unstuck in your joy. And I think the third thing we'll talk about is how I almost got in a giant fight at Busch Gardens with an entire family. I think that'll be fun. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, you definitely have to talk about that soon. And if you're a member of the family that almost kicked Daryl's butt, you should definitely drop us a note.
All right, AP, what a great first episode. Let's get it in season 2, baby.
Yes, sir, man. You have a good one. Love you guys.
Love you too, man.